Well, it's that time of the year again when I get to make my son's birthday cake. This year, the request was a Bear Inspired Avocado-saurus cake. I did think that this would be a simple cake to make compared to my Blinky Bill for his first birthday, and of course last year's Bear Inspired Frankenstein broccoli cake, but I definitely underestimated the simplicity of this cake. Don't let the cheeky sweet avocado smiley face fool you. This cake tested me more than once. At one stage, I was ready to turn the cake into cake pops because it collapsed on me not once, but twice. If you're watching carefully later on in this video, you'll probably see the point in time where this cake had to be modified to be able to keep standing. In the end, all it required was an extra dowel and a stern look, and it stayed standing, I'm happy to report, even through the transport to the venue for my son's birthday party. But I got to admit, I was feeling very nervous when I handed the cake over to the staff at the venue. So you might be wondering, what gave me so much grief? Well, firstly, probably the design. You can see how high I'm stacking the cakes here, and you can see that it's already starting to wobble. I had no intention of leaving it like that. I was always going to put support dowels in, but I thought, oh yeah, it's looking all right. You can just see how much of a lean it is whilst I push it up to be able to pop the first stick in. Then as you put more and more sticks into the cake, you can see that it begins to be quite secure. So I think the first error I made was how high I started to make this. And this wasn't the only level it needed to go. It needed to go higher, and I needed to make smaller semicircles for the top half of the avocado because that's the shape of an avocado, and I wanted this to look as close to realistic as possible. It's not every day you have to make an avocado dressed up as a dinosaur. So you can see here I've put the extra stick in, and I thought I'll chuck another one in, see how it goes, and I feel quite happy at this point. Seems quite secure, but I was wrong. It was a really hot day. The buttercream was so soft, and as you can tell, my cakes are really soft. So making this cake and trying to keep it standing was so difficult. Every time I cut into it, it would wobble. And at one point, I managed to save it from falling, and I thought, that's it, and it's not going to give me any more grief, but it did. I went to put this cake in the fridge to firm up, and I turned around and it was on its back. So propped it up, put it in the fridge, and I thought once the buttercream starts to set, it will hold it a bit like cement, I was hoping. And I took it out of the fridge, ready to continue, but it was still very, very shaky. Despite all this, I wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet. I thought, I haven't really seen what the shape of this cake is going to look like, so I just need to keep persevering, and hopefully it'll just work out. So I kept going, carving all around the base and trying to smooth out the edges to try and be a softer, roundish avocado. Sometimes I would accidentally carve out a bit too much from the cake and have to glue it back in with the buttercream, but it didn't really cause me too many issues, to be honest. You'll see that I've left the sticks in the top of the cake standing out, and I thought that was a smart move because I thought, well, I can cut them down later, but if I need to hold on to them whilst I'm carving, that would be helpful. It was not helpful. You shouldn't leave the sticks like that. I think it encouraged you to grab the top of the cake, and that had problems in itself. So eventually, once my cake started to get a bit firmer, I did cut down those sticks so that they were at even level with the top layer of the cake. So making sure that both sides of the avocado are somewhat similar in terms of shape, and then completely covering the cake in buttercream to pick up all those crumbs. You'll see later on, you can still see a few crumbs, but that's because at that point my cake had collapsed a second time, which I can tell you about soon, and I was not prepared to keep forging on with it as much as I wanted to. So you can see that I'm actually putting a lot of buttercream on my cake. I don't know if that was a good idea. I think that added a bit of extra weight to the cake, which ultimately caused it to collapse under pressure a few times. You'll notice now the sticks have disappeared. They've been chopped down, and I am still covering all of the cake with the buttercream quite thickly. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do more than one crumb coat, and that was the purpose behind that. Then I'm grabbing some extra cake that I'd previously cut. If you're wondering why all my cake is in aluminium foil, it's because I have baked the cakes in advance and popped them in the freezer, then defrosted them the night before, so I didn't have to make the cake on the same day that I was actually carving and creating. All I made on the day was the actual buttercream because I prefer to make that fresh. If you keep it in the fridge, it goes quite hard, and then you have to put it back on your food processor, and sometimes it takes just as long to get it back to a good consistency for spreading rather than just making it from scratch on the day. So that semicircle is a tail. You'll also notice later on in this video that that tail is a lot smaller than when I first attached it to the cake, because the cake is now beginning to dance off the board. It's on quite a lean, and I thought, oh no, that's all right. Maybe it'll just stay like that. Adds a bit of character. And I continued to put more heavy buttercream on top. So check out the lean on that cake. Leaning Tower of Pisa, eat your heart out. But I kept going. And I think that was my mistake. I think at this point, I probably should have intercepted and put in an extra support dowel, but I kept going. And I just assumed that once I put it in the fridge, it would firm up. Again, I was wrong. I'm a rookie baker, and I just do these cakes for fun, for family. So I have no training or experience on this, which is evident because my cake collapsed a couple of times that day. So that's a bit of a better angle to see how far forward the cake was. And if that wasn't enough, I went and added the fleshy part of the avocado, and with how thick I am putting the buttercream on, it's no wonder that all that weight is just continuing to pull the cake down. So I'll let you see what happens here. I cut that bit out of the video, but basically what happened was the cake fell forward. I had to catch it and push the whole thing back, and you will notice the sticks that I cut down are now poking out the top because the cake has shrunk down on itself. And there's a purple dowel in the back of the cake. That's my savior, I suppose. It just kept the cake from moving, and that's all it needed. The tail is a lot shorter, and I'm adding more weight to the cake by putting some coloured fondant on top. So this was just white fondant that I had, and I dyed it green, and I intended to put it all around the cake, but I kind of liked the cape effect once I put it on, so that the avocado was still showing, and it just looked like it was wearing a dinosaur costume, which is exactly what the cake was supposed to be like. So I don't use anything fancy other than what I've already got at home. Sometimes it's an X-Acto knife, sometimes it's scissors. It's just whatever I can find at the time and that I've managed to grab out of the cupboard, because I find I'm never fully prepared. And once I start, it's whatever is within arm's reach gets used to assist me in making my cakes. So I didn't like the colour of the avocado pip, so I decided to colour up some more buttercream and add that on top. It did add a little bit extra weight, but it wasn't an issue, and I really like how it looks now. Down on the bench, you'll see I've got some pre-cut teeth for the dinosaur's costume. Again, white fondant. I just guessed really the size of the teeth based on what the size of the cake was. Now I'm adding on some eyes, and finally the colourful spikes. Again, my white fondant, I just coloured small amounts of it in all different colours using gloves so that I could do it all in the same day, probably something I could have done in advance. Cut them down into triangles and simply attach them using water. I don't use anything else to attach my fondant to fondant, because I find that water works the best. And considering the angle and everything that these spikes were on, I didn't have any problems with them. They didn't fall off. The water acted as a great adhesive and didn't give me any trouble during the making of this cake. So I was getting really excited at this point. The finishing time was here. I'd already attached all the spikes, none of them had fallen off, and it was almost time to put on the face. Without a face, the cakes just don't look the same. It just brings them to life. This was simply, again, fondant that I'd coloured, and then I just did some cheeky expressions, popped on some rosy little cheeks, and put eyeballs on the costume. And that was it. I'm really happy that I made this cake, that it's standing, and it's what my son actually asked for. A Bear Inspired Avocado-saurus for his 5th birthday. Not only did it look good, it tasted great too. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a look at some of the other cakes that I've made, including a cheeky pineapple from Hey Bear.